Welcome to the week 4 of the NeMTSS Summit 2020. As you have been experiencing, educators really are moving forward into the unknown during these uncertain times. However, our team is hopeful that these opportunities to reflect on strengthening systems to support staff and students will assist in this effort. We have had the opportunity to learn more about equitable opportunities for all, engaging partnerships, and adults as change agents. Today only furthers our understanding, and due to the extensive knowledge and experiences of Pat Connor, today's presenter, we will learn more about creating a climate of support within an MTSS framework. Pat Connor is a senior policy and practice consultant for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, abbreviated as CASEL. As a consultant with CASEL, she provides technical assistance and support to states involved in the Collaborative States Initiative. Impressively, Pat was an educator for 34 years and recently retired from the Tennessee Department of Education as the Executive Director for the Office of Student Support. In that role, she provided oversight to 146 districts on alternative education, family resource centers, school climate, Project Aware, school-based mental health initiative, trauma-informed schools, and extended learning. Her belief is that all children deserve to feel safe emotionally and physically at school, and that families in the community play an integral role in making schools safe places to learn and grow. This, among many other reasons, is why she is best equipped to help us explore the SEL roadmap to create safe, supportive, and equitable learning environments that promote all students' social and emotional development. With that, the NeMTSS team would like to extend our extreme gratitude to Pat Connor for taking time to join us and assist us in developing our skills in creating a positive and inclusive school climate to engage and support all learners.
Great. Thank you, Casey. So that's a great introduction. I'm going to share my screen with you at this time. So let me pull that up and get that into presenter mode for sure. Oh, bear with me just a moment to make sure I've got the right settings going on. No, I want to switch that. As I am trying to get myself oriented to this, I want to tell you that our topic today is going to be about adults and why social emotional learning, adult social emotional learning, is extremely important at this time. So, welcome. This is my favorite character, Elaine. If you've ever seen Elaine dance, you know what I'm talking about. She is very enthusiastic, and that's how I feel today as I come to this webinar to present to you. Again, I'm Pat Connor, and Casey gave me a fabulous intro, and I hope, as I tell my boss, senior, I don't know if that means wise or old, but my years of experience have led me to this role with CASEL. So we like to start in CASEL with our 3 signature practices. And so what I'd like to do right now is invite you to really look at this picture and to read the instructions. So we're all in this together, but are we? We're in the same storm, perhaps, but are we all in the same boat? And what does the different sizes of the boats symbolize? How does this image apply to you and your work or your students? So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to put in the chat box your responses to these questions. What does this mean, this image mean to you? Yeah, lots of ups and downs in education right now. Absolutely. And that is great. We're in the storm together, but it's not necessarily the same for all. Yeah, we're in different storms in different sized boats. And that has a lot to do with equity that you're seeing there too. Yeah, staff and students are not experiencing these the pandemic and the racial unrest in the same ways. Yeah, great comments. Yeah, I like this one. You can be in the same storm, but you have different resources and experiences. And if you look down to the far right corner, you see the little person in a canoe or a kayak. Their resources are limited, but they're still out there navigating this storm. Great feedback. Thank you for doing that. So let's move on with that. And I want to tell you just briefly a little bit about CASEL. And again, that we love an acronym in education. And Casey told you what the CASEL acronym stood for. And what I love about CASEL, it is the premier authority and source for knowledge about high quality social emotional learning. And they have been in existence over now 25 years. When I first experienced CASEL, I was in my school district where I worked for 27 years before going to the state. And when I came upon their research about the importance of social emotional learning, I'm not kidding you, I started screaming from my desk. I was so excited. For years, we had taught social skill development or life skills in our school system, but this just really connected it together. So there are a premier authority on social emotional learning, and I'm extremely honored to be a part of this organization. And you're right. In the box before you put your comments, our students, our families, and our communities are really wrestling right now with the pandemic and the results of the pandemic, and those results don't appear to be lessening anytime soon as far as economic job loss. We have kids and families that are homeless, parents with no jobs, no food, and we also have the social unrest that is just all over our newspapers and social media. And we really all deal with this in our own unique way and coming to an understanding of how that pandemic and social unrest affects me versus Lee, another little girl in the classroom, is extremely important because there is going to be heightened anxiety and trauma around this, and you've already experienced it as you have entered into the school year. But what we do know is that an education that really focuses on social emotional learning will go move mountains to build those healthy relationships and engage your students and support adults, which is what we're talking about today. So let me just give you, I would say it's brief, but it's not really brief. It's a rather long definition of what social emotional learning is. And it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It begins the day you're born and ends the day you die. It's a process we all continue to learn and grow from. But it's that knowledge and those attitudes and those skills that are going to help you manage your emotions and set and achieve positive goals and show empathy and maintain positive relationships and make responsible decisions. And on the right, you see the CASEL wheel. And within it, you see the 5 core competencies. And I can let you read those for yourself. And we really put that in the heart. These skills are the heart of our homes, our schools and our classrooms, and they should be integrated and embedded into your curriculum and instruction, your practices, your policies, and in community partnerships and family partnerships. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, about how you can integrate and embed those in everything you do. And really, it's what I tell school districts. This is how we do business every day. And SEL, to me, in my opinion, is the great equalizer. It's good for all students. It's good for all families. It's good for all community members. And it's good for all adults. So these are the skills that we really need to call upon in this day and time. And these are the 5 core competencies. And to me, I'm just going to tell you what really resonates with me when I see these. Self-awareness. At this particular moment, our emotions may be dysregulated because we've been through so many emotions. I don't know about you, but personally, I feel as though I've been on a roller coaster. So being aware of what those emotions are, and with self-management is how do you work through those emotions? How do you, once you've had those identified, how are you going to stay regulated and work towards goals that are important to you and to your school as well? And social awareness and developing that empathy. And we'll talk many times about circle activities, wonderful ways to promote trust and build relationships and to develop empathy. And of course, everything is so important. And to me, the foundation of all of these competencies are relationship skills. And I'm going to hopefully have time to show you a video at the end from a teacher here in Nashville who really brings that home about the importance of relationship skills. And through all of this, responsible decision making is like a river that runs through it all. And really making those responsible and ethical decisions right now are going to be very important. So I always had in my goal and in my decisions, I always kept students first. And my byline when I sign out is children first. So keeping that in mind, it really does help you with your decisions. So I'm going to let you watch a little video about why social emotional adult SEL is important to focus on.
Social emotional learning supports both children and adults. An effective approach to school-wide SEL provides regular opportunities for staff to cultivate their own social, emotional, and cultural competence, and to develop a sense of community.
When we think about adult SEL, we're talking about the adult's own social and emotional and cultural competence. Do they have opportunities to reflect on their own self-awareness, their own bias, their own identity, their own thoughts and feelings and understanding of who they are and how they fit in? And we're also thinking about opportunities that they have to reflect and build skills for stress management, for relationship skills.
At the Facing History New Tech High School, all educators attend training on social emotional learning.
As adults, we went through training, so you will hear teachers say, I have to have a restorative conversation with Miss So-and-so because we had words, or we're not getting along or something like that. So it's modeling it with each other. So when you're doing it with the students, it's more natural, it's more organic. The other piece too is kids see when adults aren't getting along.
Some of the research has really shown us that when teachers have positive social and emotional competencies, they're more likely to be able to manage their stressors in the classroom context. They're able to provide more student choice and voice and opportunity within the classroom context. They are better classroom managers. They are actually able to manage their own stress broadly, right? So they're less likely to burn out, which has huge implications for teacher well-being, for teacher shortages and reductions emotions and the like. So teacher SEL not only affects their students, but also has a broader context.
Principal Mark Ingoglia tried a new approach to modeling collaboration for students. He moved all the teachers' desks into one teacher workroom. This expanded the opportunities for the teachers to collaborate with one another and practice the same relationship-building skills they tried to promote with students.
We have a teacher room where all their desks are. Sure, one teacher only teaches in one room, but when they're not teaching, they're in that teacher workroom. We do our best to have teams of teachers off at the same time. They all have the exact same 80 freshmen, so they're able to collaborate every day if they want. If you're sitting in a room and something's bothering you or you need help or something, you're going to ask somebody in the room.
At the district level, Cleveland's Humanware Social Emotional Learning Department supports SEL in the schools. Their meetings begin with stress management exercises like breathing, centering themselves, and welcoming one another.
I've adapted our Humanware Executive Committee meetings that we have once a month. We now sit in a circle, so we're modeling that good circle behavior. Everyone has a voice in those meetings for sharing and bringing up issues of concern. Several years ago, we adopted what's called Communicate with Heart from the Cleveland Clinic. It was their customer experience program. And once it came to us, I kind of moved that to customer and colleague experience. Every staff member in our district is trained in Communicate with Heart. So it is a way to approach people when you meet them for the first time, and a way to approach people when there's a problem between them that needs to be worked through.
Unrelenting stress can lead to teacher burnout. When staff are engaged in working together around shared problems of practice and providing feedback with one another, they are better equipped to support learning outcomes. One way to support one another is through notes, bulletin boards, and positive talk in staff lounges.
If staff does not have a voice, it can be very depressing, it can be defeating and deflating, and I never want them to go through that, okay? I never want anybody to not feel positive about what they're doing. Being a building principal, it's fantastic, but you know what? Whether I'm talking to somebody that might work in the cafeteria, a crossing guard, somebody in the office, somebody that's in a classroom, instructional support, classroom teachers, we are all here together, okay? So we want to make sure we support each other. So I'm really big on building a solid school culture. And if somebody's down and out, what can we do to help?
Social emotional learning supports both children.
So as you can see, those aspects of adult social and emotional learning are something we're going to go down a little deeper into further on into this PowerPoint. So adult SEL skills, they are more important now than ever. And really, I can't say this enough. Teachers are beyond stress. Administrators are beyond stressed. All folks working in that school environment are dealing with a lot of challenges right now. And what social emotional skills do is to help them use those to help them navigate through this and to deal with their emotional needs. And what we also know is that it really does need to center on that relationship building. As we know, one caring adult in the life of a child can make a huge impact. The Search Institute talks about the power of 5. And when you ask students, especially high school students, who are 5 adults that you could count on and that you feel you trust and could go to talk, many students don't have 5. They don't have 1. And that's what we want to make sure that we really develop those authentic partnerships. And it's important for us to model that and to really reflect and do a lot to try to interrupt those biases right now that we're seeing around those social injustices. And the exciting thing about this is many of us haven't been in school since March. Now that we're returning, this is really an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to think about new types of learning. What in the past you've been wanting to change, now's the time you can change that and revise. Or if it's working great, expand and enhance that. All with the goal of supporting students within rich and supportive learning environments. So why do we prioritize SEL and what we've learned? And this is research. So what we do know is that teachers who are skilled at regulating their emotions and have great social emotional learning skills report less burnout. And schools who really prioritize social emotional learning add to that less burnout by teachers. And 85% of teachers are reporting now that work-life imbalance is really affecting their ability to teach. This is where we need to set teachers up to be successful in school by having them get together in circles or groups to really talk about and process and to reflect on their own social emotional skills. And we know that those skills really affect student conduct, engagement, and attachment to school and your academic performance. I used to run several groups within my school district, and we called them care teams. Children are resilient and empowered. And those teachers were teacher-led. These were teacher-led. And teachers met with small groups of 6 to 8 students and really focused on social emotional learning skills. And one of the big takeaways I always heard was, well, Jimmy's a problem. He's a problem in my class and blah, blah, blah. And the teacher next to them would say, oh, he's great in my classroom. And so if you did a little in-depth observation, what I saw was that teacher and her social emotional learning skills were not at the level as the teacher next door to her who had no issue with that student. So when we think about social emotional learning, how does that influence a student's academic performance, their conduct, and their engagement? So right now, I just want to take a moment and I want you to read these 5 challenges. And in the chat box in just a moment, what I'd like for you to do is to think about what challenge are you facing today that is particularly applicable to you. And I really want to offer a 5th one as well, and that's decision fatigue. Sometimes when we feel we're making too many decisions, and because of the volume of decisions we have to make, we wonder if we're making the right decisions, and you just end up making decisions sometimes that you're not happy with. So I call that decision fatigue. So I'll give you a few seconds, 30 seconds or so to really read through that, and I'd like for you to put in the chat box which one you're dealing with right now. And there may be more than one, and that's okay. It may be all 5. Okay, if you'll take a moment and put your challenge you're facing in the chat box. We'll take about a minute and a half to do that. Time, overwhelmed. Sense of urgency is out of order, yes. Time to prioritize. Complexity of the situation, absolutely. And Michelle has decision fatigue, and I can relate to that as well. Lack of prep, yeah. The teachers in my district are really struggling with that and the time for prep. Okay, so I'm going to close out the chat box so that we can move on. And this I want to show you because I'm extremely proud of this, and this is what we're going to focus on today, is adult SEL within our Reunite, Renew, and Thrive SEL roadmap for returning to school. And in the chat box, you will notice that there has been a link to this document put in before folks put in their challenges from Amanda at castle.org, Reopening with Self. And I really invite you to follow along and click on that and to follow along as we talk about this. And so what is the SEL roadmap? Well, the roadmap was developed for you, educators, at the school and district level. And it was developed for where you are at any stage of SEL implementation. There's no right or wrong with that. So it's to build upon your existing efforts. It's to support you in planning that transition back to school and throughout the year. And it really is helpful to reflect and really take a moment to pause upon what you're doing now to be able to leverage that moment. So that is the purpose of our roadmap. So how do you use that roadmap? If you open it, you will see there are 4 critical practices, and within each of those critical practices, we have 3 to 5 activities. And those activities are important because we're going to show you in the next activity the essential questions, which are your reflection questions, and then how do you prepare, implement, and sustain the work. So prepare what you do now or before, implement the first 4 to 6 weeks or 3 months, and how are you going to sustain that? And what I particularly love about this roadmap are the tools. We have put with each activity a curated set of user-friendly tools for teachers and administrators to use from the get-go. So even though there are 4 critical practices, by all means, I hear you, you're overwhelmed. So how can we chunk that down into bite-sized pieces that are helpful? And we do that, and when you notice on that reopening page, there is a box you can click to download the SEL Roadmap Organizer. And that's the purpose of the organizer. All 4 of the critical practices and all 16 of the activities are on this organizer. So what we're asking is that you chunk it down and maybe select one activity from each of the 4 practices to focus on and to prioritize those activities. From 1, oh my gosh, we got to do it right now, this is most immediately, or 3, well, we can do this later on. And then to look at how we prepare to do this activity in the coming year, how can we implement that in the first weeks, and how can we sustain that work going forward? So again, this helps you chunk it down to not be such an overwhelming task, to make it small, actionable steps for you. So what are those 4 critical practices? And the first one is taking time to cultivate those relationships. And our district, state, and school theory of action is focused around focus areas. That the first one is foundational. The foundation, how do we build that foundation? The second one will focus on teachers, and that's what I'm going to focus on today, how we can design opportunities where adults can connect, heal, and build their capacity to support students. And then the third one is all about students. How can we create safe, supportive, and equitable learning environments that promote all students' social-emotional development? And the fourth one is all about data. How can we share power with data? Data is not for one person to hold on themselves, but to share that. One of the most impactful sharings I ever did was with our school climate survey for our high schools. We gave it to our positive youth development teams to take that data, analyze it, and prepare a presentation to their teachers and their principals. And it was just so empowering to them to be able to do that. So let's take a look at how one of those critical practices and their activity are organized. And then we're going to take a deeper dive into critical practice 2 with teachers and adults. So again, you'll see within each of these practices, you're going to have all of those 5 areas or priorities: the essential questions, how you prepare, how you implement, how you sustain, and then the tools. And all these tools are user-friendly, can be used now, or they can be adapted to use in virtual learning as well. So I'm sure you've seen this analogy before. How is staff self-care like airplane safety? So more than ever, we need to take care of ourselves before we can attend to the needs of our students. And if you are involved in trauma work, we have had a trauma-informed schools initiative at the state, and that was our mantra. You've got to put your oxygen mask on first. Take care of yourself before you can help students. So this is a school in Memphis that I trained to be a part of our trauma-informed schools, and this was way before COVID. In fact, this was at least 2 years ago. And so when we came to that section about staff self-care, that's how they brought it home, and by providing these masks that we wear every day now to show we need to put our mask on. And I think this is so powerful to see teachers with their mask on, ready to take care of themselves before students. So let's go into a deeper dive into what critical practice 2 is. And that is, again, to design opportunities where adults can connect, heal, and build their capacity to support students. All those feelings that you had, that you shared in that chat box, the anxiety, the feeling of being overwhelmed, and, the sense of urgency, all of that, we have to provide opportunities for us as educators to really process and heal from these, all these momentous events. And this practice will help you create those working conditions, the time, the space, the professional learning, to give those opportunities, well-designed opportunities for you and your staff and all educators to really engage in their own self-care and to develop supportive staff relationships. So these are the 4 activities that we have within the critical practice 2. And we're going to take a dive, and I'm going to show you that practice, but that activity, but also a practice that we highlight within that, because I think that you will find that helpful. So the first critical practice, 2.1, is to allow space for connection, listening, and healing among all adults in the school. So the essential question, when you're thinking about this, you ask yourself, how do we, in central office, in our school, how do we maximize the supportive connections between all adults in the school community in ways that look different from previous years, because this is not a normal year? So that's a reflective question. So how do we prepare? One of the big things that I really embrace is to really establish dedicated time and space for this collective healing to occur, to make that a priority in returning to school, to really implement things like staff check-ins, and to foster that whole culture of staff self-care, to put that first when you go back to school, and not just in the beginning, but all year long. And one of the things that we want you to think about is to implement a very simple strategy that I'm going to show you in just a moment, are the 3 signature practices to promote SEL. And I'm going to talk about that. And then the other is to really facilitate and implement either virtual or in-person healing circles with your staff, to really think about and process their emotions at this particular time. So let me speak a moment about the 3 signature SEL practices. And they are super simple. Those simple signature practices are welcoming inclusion activity, as I had a welcoming activity, the engaging strategies, and that's the working time that you have, and then to end the day or end the meeting with an optimistic closure. One of the things that I recommend, or really 2 things, is that all staff meetings occur in a circle and include these 3 signature practices. All school board meetings include these SEL practices. All team meetings, any meeting that you have within the community, within the school, within central office, include these SEL strategies, because they're very simple, they're very doable, and they promote social and emotional learning skills when you do those. And the other thing that we want to talk about with Critical Practice 2.2, and very important, is to ensure access for teachers to have mental health and trauma supports, all staff, as needed. Some of us know may be suffering from depression, high anxiety, and we know that this transition back to school only adds to that. So the essential question for you to reflect upon with this practice is, how can your school put staff well-being at the center of school culture? How are you going to prioritize staff self-care, and well-being? And so to prepare, we're asking administrators to really meet with all staff at the beginning of school individually, to do a check-in and to really establish that process. So if I'm experiencing significant stress or trauma, what do I do? What is the protocol for that? And how can you use your community partners to support school staff in addressing trauma? As you know, you cannot do this work by yourself. Community support and involvement is key. And many of us have school-based mental health centers that are working in our schools, or other types of organizations that we can call upon to help us during this time. And one of the practices that I'm going to show you a video about is one called Tap In, Tap Out protocol. So if you're having a meltdown in some form, that you just really need a break, so how can you get that need met? And Tap In, Tap Out does that. It's just something for you to think about. And again, those partnerships with mental health providers to really align and support school staff, and continue to check in with your staff on a regular basis. So let's look at what the Tap In, Tap Out protocol looks like.
At Fall Hamilton, our common goal here is the children. Sometimes kids are in crisis, and it's just emotionally draining as a teacher. But at the end of the day, you know that these kids rely on you, so we also need to take care of ourselves. We know you can't help others until you help yourself. Sometimes you just need a minute. 1, 2, 3. You need to step out of your own room, take a deep breath.
As educators, we may be having a rough day, and sometimes we get frustrated too. So we have a tap in, tap out strategy here. If something happens in the classroom, teachers have the ability to contact someone on the text chain. If there's a student that needs some extra support.
Oh, excuse me.
If the teacher needs extra support, then someone else is able to come in and provide that.
if you need a minute, you can text someone and be like, hey, can you cover my class? Can you give me a second? And we will gladly cover one another.
In terms of faculty support, we feel more supported here in this environment because we know that it's a collaborative effort and everyone is going to be heard.
You'd sometimes just need to ask for help, and it's okay, and it's really accepted here, and it's promoted. No one's alone. We're a ship, and we run together, and there's someone always that has your back.
So lesson learned, do not check the chat box as you're doing a video because the video stops. But I had a great comment in the chat box that I'd like to talk about. Many of the districts in Nebraska have PBIS, and PBIS and SEL are perfect matches. The foundational piece for PBIS is relationships and how to build those relationships to promote positive behavior. And so I really encourage the melding of the two. When you talk about reopening and transitioning, you know, to really take a keen look at your PBIS strategies and how you can enhance and expand those or maybe re-energize those as you transition back to school. Very important. So you saw the tap in, tap out, and for many schools, this may not be doable. At the school that this is implemented, who are the folks that they utilize for tap in, tap out? They utilize other teachers. They utilize the principal. Matthew goes in and relieves teachers all the time. Their counselors, their family resource center director, anyone who is willing and volunteers to be a part of that team to honor a teacher's wish to be relieved for just about 5 minutes or so. And so one of the things that we promote is if you need a break is to really have a teacher safe space. And this is in a rural school up in East Tennessee. And as you can see, it's not elegant. You see somebody donated a couch. There is a brown lazy boy in the corner, and there's snacks and there's scents, and they do have some music, low music in there as well. And they have related their feelings to rock formations. And so it's not a huge space. It's with partitions, but it's a safe place that students are not allowed to enter, only teachers. And the counselor there said that was the best thing they ever did for teachers, that she would walk by that space many a day and people would be in the recliner taking a quick 10-minute power nap. They jump up and say, I'm ready to go back. So a great strategy and a safe space for teachers as well. So 2.3 is we want to really capture this moment to identify opportunities for innovation and anti-racist practices. And so the essential question here is, in what new ways can you maximize the strengths of all adults who are part of our community in and out of school to provide that holistic support to your students? And to prepare for that, we want educators to really engage in formal and informal conversations, not just with themselves, but with students as well. And to really look at team teachers and to play to their strengths, to deliver instruction and student support, and to really assess staff and adult capacity around those anti-racist practices. And I'm going to show you a practice that is recommended for this in particularly. And then when you implement this is to really build that consistent time into the schedule. I cannot emphasize this enough, to be intentional in designating time for staff to collaborate, opportunities for staff to partner with students in the design of those learning spaces, and then really, again, to work with community partners to design those innovative strategies. A mentoring program is one of the single most effective programs you can have, or tutoring programs, to build those relationships and connections with community partners. So I would like for you to watch this video, and I apologize for the videos, but because of our lack of interaction, this hopefully will lend itself positively to our engagement. So this is a reflection. How do we reflect on our teaching practices?
There are many teachers already doing great work, and I just want to take the time to thank them and to big them up for the magic that they're creating in their classrooms. We can all get better at our practice and put in the anti-racist and equity lenses to our work to ensure that we do no harm. Good instruction should be student-centered, and student-centered is being culturally responsive and being anti-racist. And so for the teachers, one way to get better is really to start with self. Really check in with yourself. What are my biases? How are we being self-aware? So, if I'm a teacher or curriculum developer, let's check this for an anti-racist lens. Let's check this for a culturally responsive lens. Now let's do the research and ask people what they mean and really be deliberate about that self-awareness so that we're not imposing our values. We have to be mindful of our power and not abusing it. Another thing that I would say is the collective work. Get together with your crew and learn together. And that learning can happen through book clubs. It could be looking at videos and going to talks or sitting through online Zoom conversations. There's so many ways that we can learn, but it doesn't just stop at reading or watching. It's talking about, now that we know, how will we do better? So coming up with a plan to do more with each other and to hold each other accountable. I also have people think about what's their curricula look like. Is what I'm teaching representative of my students? Am I affirming my students in what I teach and how I teach? Am I affirming my students when I interact with them? So really asking those questions of self and of our practice so that we ensure that our students are safe. I would also push educators to really think about the larger context. Where are students coming from? What are their stories? How can I learn their stories? What's my plan to get to know the stories of my students, of their families? I think we need to really start asking our students in our communities what they need. I think too often we go up in communities, we go into our classrooms and we think we know what people need. If we don't ask them what they need, we're not giving them what they need. And so we constantly have to ask the people that we are in partnership with how we can do better and how to learn together. There are many.
So that was a great video and really one to be used for reflection. Because we're short on time and I want to get through this PowerPoint, I'm going to move on to practice 2.4, and that's all about the data and providing those professional learning opportunities and to really monitor that and to gauge that. And I can't begin to stress how important professional learning is and for educators. And I know the myriad of topics that you are required to participate in with your professional learning, but at least one session a year should be around creation of those equitable learning environments. And what does that mean? And how do you do it? What are the culturally responsive practices? How do you teach SEL? How do you integrate SEL into instruction? Not many folks know that there are 10 instructional practices that promote social and emotional learning in the classroom. It's from great teachers and leaders. And that document, if you Google great teachers and leaders or 10 instructional practices, it will pop up. Great document. And one of the things that we want to make sure you do is develop that infrastructure around meeting the needs of educators in their learning. And then to implement that is to provide resources. so educators can address possibly their own explicit and implicit bias, equity, trauma, cultural responsiveness, and then coaching and feedback. So one example of a free resource that we highlight in our roadmap is from American Institute of Research, their trauma sensitive schools, and you may be very familiar with this. And there are free online modules that you can use for staff development that, again, are excellent. So how do we sustain all that? And again, it's all about prioritizing time and space for adults to reflect and heal and connect, and to collect that data on staff needs, and to really prioritize staff developing self-care plans that are promoted all year long. And then collaboration and professional learning with all adults in your building are extremely important. So right now, I would like to devote about 5 minutes or so to questions, and I will look at the chat box now. If you have questions that you would like to ask me about SEL practices and the utilization of your PBIS program throughout K-12, PBIS at our high school level, I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with as I am at the elementary and middle school level. But again, all centered around forging those relationships. So I hope you see from the roadmap, I hope you have two things that you take away from this. Number one, that it's easy to use, that you can utilize this and refer to this as you continue planning and opening your schools. I know many of you are 3 weeks in, but how you can use this to form and mold your strategies and your priorities moving forward throughout the year. And again, that organizer, we can't do everything. There are just a ton of things pulling at us right now, coming from all directions. So how can we chunk it down and make it user-friendly? How can we merge our concepts with PBIS, with social emotional learning? And I do want you to know that CASEL and the PBIS folks are partners with this. And the PBIS folks 100% endorse social emotional learning because it's evident in your PBIS framework as well. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask at this time? I'll give you a few seconds to enter those in, about 30 seconds. And if there's anything else that I neglected to answer, and Karen, I don't know if I answered your question, but I'd be happy to expound on that further. Yeah, I love the tap in, tap out idea. It is wonderful. And you, some people ask me, how could you do this virtually? If you're a team teacher on a virtual platform, you can, of course, do that very easily. But it will take some thought about how to achieve that virtually. Absolutely. So what I'd like to do now is to show you a video about what does adult SEL look like. And when you see the title pop up, it's going to say student-centered discipline. Don't let that fool you, because as we said before, adults and how they interact with students does affect student discipline. And so I want you to see an example of how one teacher utilizes relationships to address student discipline.
going to do a little speed dating with poetry. So we're each going to start with one of the poems that you all have written. They are anonymous on here, right? So your names are not on it, but they're all poems that we've written. Some are mine, the rest are yours. And I want us to kind of read through them and kind of see each other's work and what you guys have written. They're really fun. They're great poems.
So what you saw today was a classroom where students were allowed to read each other's work. They have a chance to write poetry about their lives and where they come from, who they are as people, what they value, where they want to go, their hopes, their dreams, what people can't see about them, how people judge them, how they feel about life, kind of where they are now.
Start here.
As an English teacher, I know that more than any other classroom, I can really empower them to be themselves, to express themselves, figure out who they are. There's times where they go through days and don't speak to anybody about their lives. They feel that no one really cares about what they have to say or who they are. And so as an English teacher, they're able to come in here and open up in a way that they probably haven't done before.
Mr. Model Classroom to me is a relaxed, chilled place, because I'm not a really reader like that. But when I first got to his class, it made me realize that reading is much more than what I thought it was.
How's this classroom?
Students come into my classroom and they know that they have their book out and they'll start reading, but a lot of times.
All right, attendees, I know that she was having some internet difficulties because there's a storm where she's at in Tennessee. So we will go ahead and wrap this up. Regardless, the shifts in these last months have heightened our understanding of how students' social and emotional competencies support their learning and development. Students are certainly best able to develop and apply the competencies when caring adults work together to create equitable learning environments where all students feel like they belong and have consistent opportunities to learn about, reflect on, and practice SEL, explore their social and cultural identities, and express their voice and agency. So we do thank Pat very much for helping us learn to intentionally build inclusive environments that are centered around students' social, emotional, and academic development, as well as their behavioral development. You provided some great tools and resources to assist educators. So we thank her for that. Specifically, we enjoyed her discussing how PBIS and SEL should meld. That was quite helpful. Speaking from the NeMTSS team, we certainly believe this as well. So our team truly appreciates Pat's extensive knowledge and background. So we want to thank her once again.